Hey everyone, I'm John Negroni, film editor for theyoungfolks.com, and I'm also the host of the Cinemaholics podcast. Let's talk about Clifford the Big Red Dog. Clifford is one of those movies where I'm not actually sure who was really looking forward to this. Who was asking for a Clifford movie? I'm sure those folks are out there. I don't know them personally. Now, this movie is based, of course, on the classic Scholastic books by Norman Bridwell, who gets a kind of playful nod in this movie as a character played by John Cleese. And yeah, these books, they go all the way back to 1963. They've been around for a long time. So loads of people of all ages probably grew up with Clifford the Big Red Dog, at least in their surrounding realm of influence, right? You know, a lot of other people might have also enjoyed the PBS cartoon. I never watched it. In fact, I kind of forgot it existed until this movie came out. I was like, oh yeah, I guess there was a cartoon on PBS. I don't think I ever watched more than one or two episodes. And when people think of Scholastic books, they tend to think of Clifford. He's even the brand's official mascot. He's an icon in his own right. So here we go. We finally get a live action movie about Clifford the Big Red Dog, although the word finally is doing a lot of extra work there, I think. This is the latest film coming out in both theaters and simultaneously available to stream on Paramount Plus. Clearly, Paramount really wants to do whatever they can to boost their streaming service, especially in the wake of that SpongeBob movie that came out earlier this year. They did that SpongeBob show, the Rugrats show reboot. They did all kinds of Star Trek stuff. They're going for it over on Paramount Plus. I'll be honest, I haven't watched much on Paramount Plus since getting it. It's kind of just one of those things that I have, and I don't really love. If there was a streaming service I was going to get rid of, that might be the first one on the chopping block for me, which is kind of sad. It has a lot of things that I am interested in, but it hasn't been grabbing me so far, at least in terms of their original content. Now, for Clifford, originally this was going to be a Universal movie. They were going to make a movie about Clifford actually with the help of Illumination Entertainment back in 2012. I think they were going to do a live action version of this still. Like, it wasn't Illumination in the sense that they were going to do a Despicable Me kind of animated thing, but maybe use some of Illumination's help with bringing the CGI. That's speculation on my part. But they were going to make a Clifford movie all the way back in 2012, so almost a decade ago. And they ultimately canceled it, and I think it's easy to see why they decided to not go forward, because we now have this movie from Walt Becker. He's the director of the most recent Alvin and the Chipmunks movie. I think that was called The Road Chip, and that was, I think, the last one that they did back in 2015. And Walt Becker is kind of funny too, because he also did Van Wilder and Wild Hogs and one other movie I forget. So it's kind of an interesting filmography for this director, kind of where he started, and this is his second kind of family film that he's done since making, Old Dogs. I think that was the other one he did. Now, Clifford the Big Red Dog, it stars Darby Camp. You might recognize her from Big Little Lies, the HBO series. She plays Emily Elizabeth Howard, who's a 12-year-old girl who's recently moved to New York with her mother, played by Sienna Guillory. There's an odd thing here, by the way, where her mother has a British accent, but she doesn't. Neither does her uncle. And they kind of just say in the movie, because she grew up in the UK, but they didn't, so she still has her British accent. I'm like, okay, well, why? I mean, it's just there. It's just kind of a thing in the movie. It adds nothing to the story, but they, of course, address it because otherwise it'd be very distracting. There are a lot of things in this movie that just happen, and they try to explain it. They try to make sense out of it for the audience, but it just makes you wonder, why do this at all? Cut that part out. Just change that. And they don't. This is just a movie full of unforced errors, I think. But yeah, so she lives with her mother in New York, and yeah, Emily, she's struggling. She wants to make friends, and she isn't really doing so great on that front. She has a school bully who, good gracious, is honestly one of the most embarrassingly written mean girls in a film with a budget this big, right? It really is bizarrely cringeworthy. Like, you have to really work hard to do writing this awkward and painful, at least in my opinion, for this mean girl character. And so yeah, even though Emily, she's not doing so great on that front, it's odd because they say that she just moved to this area, but she knows her entire block by, like, everyone knows her by name. It's, again, this movie just, it says and does things that contradict each other constantly, and you just kind of have to not think while watching this movie. Like, obviously there are movies you turn your brain off, right? And that can be fun. I love turning my brain off during a movie. It feels great. Sometimes, for me, it's therapy. There are other times when I feel like the movie just, it wants me to turn my brain off, and I feel a little bit like, I don't want to do that right now. I just want to watch your movie, and it can be difficult for that to work, right? So with Clifford, okay, so Emily, she has a predicament. It's not that big of a deal. She can't really make friends, but things kind of turn around for her when she and her uncle, who I mentioned before, he's a bit of a hapless, clumsy guy played by Jack Whitehall. They come across a red puppy that takes to her immediately and could be the key, the crucial ingredient to building up her confidence and making her world a little bit brighter. The only catch is that for mysterious reasons, Clifford, this little puppy, overnight becomes bigger, much bigger, though noticeably not as big in the books because, I mean, it is New York, and they have a $64 million budget. That can only do so much, and I can kind of see why they would kind of make Clifford a more medium-sized dog, but, if you can get past that, you might be okay with this movie. Clifford himself can't talk like he does in the cartoon, but that actually does match how it is in the books. I don't think in any of the books he could talk, so that's fine. But one issue with the film is how empty of a character this big red dog is. He has a personality, I guess, but he's just like any other dog. There's nothing really all that special about him except for the fact that he's big. It's just an hour and a half of watching a dog do normal dog stuff while big, and people kind of simply gawk at him, and they do the whole, like, he's big on Instagram, all that stuff you would expect from something like this, because it is a movie in 2021. And even so, I don't think the plot of this movie is terrible. Like, the story, I should say. The plot is actually kind of bad, but the story isn't terrible. I mean, they find some interesting things to do with this whole life growth thing that happens, and there are people who want to take advantage of Clifford, and none of it's surprising, but sure, it's something. There's something in this movie. There are even a handful of clever jokes here and there, usually with the uncle character. But yeah, as I've been mentioning, there are so many bizarre story mistakes and plot mistakes just littered throughout this thing. Even a kid who's only half paying attention might just kind of like look up and be like, that doesn't make any sense, and like kind of scoff at it. And yeah, that's a huge red flag for me, pun intended. The supporting cast, they're operating on an almost entertaining level of Sesame Street energy, to the point where I half expected Muppets to show up, even playing Tony Hale's henchman. Hale, by the way, plays a pretty superb villain in this movie, actually. He's one of the few characters here who really fits the anything goes vibe that this movie seems to be aiming for. There are other actors here who should be doing anything else instead of this, especially Rosie Perez. I have no idea what she's doing in here. She gets a very awkward scene, disappears, despite the fact that she's Rosie Perez. I don't understand how that happened. Yet, despite all that, it's oddly hard for me to stay mad at a movie like Clifford the Big Red Dog. I'm not mad at it. It has all these blunders, but its puppy dog eyes are getting to me. I mean, much like Clifford himself, you can't help but find the whole thing pretty adorable. And I only half mean that as a condescending pejorative. There's nothing special here, honestly, beyond an opportunity for fans of the character across generations, so parents, grandparents, and kids and grandkids, to be able to, bond over a new story with Clifford, flimsy and inadequate as it is. And yeah, it might even kickstart some people, some families digging back into the long, colorful history of Clifford the Big Red Dog through other mediums. And hey, if we do get another movie about Clifford the Big Red Dog, hey, the least these filmmakers can do, all I ask, is make the dog big. Like, just go for it. Make him bigger than you're thinking right now. And I'll be much happier than I am right now with this movie. So Clifford the Big Red Dog, it's now playing in theaters and is available to stream on Paramount+. I have a feeling if you're checking this out, you already know whether or not you are going to see it. And if you have your own thoughts in it, hey, tell me why I'm wrong. Maybe there's something here that I missed about the magic of Clifford. I don't know what that might be. But hey, it is Clifford, the Big Red Dog. He can do no wrong. He's a perfect dog. All right, that's it for me for this one. Kind of a weird one, but I'll see you all on the next one.